So I did ask a question: if King Charles and his sons were deemed to have had a fair complexion, would you have automatically considered that a misinterpretation of some sort? And your general answer was no, given what you know. But more importantly, you submitted this link here from Oxford, the lexical, and I'm going to use this. Now, before I get into that, it states Middle English via Old French from Latin complexion combination. The term originally denoted physical constitution or temperament determined by the combination of the four bodily humors, but this one is from Sense 1. It's the very first one. This is the general, typical definition of this word from as the late 16th century. The natural color, texture, and appearance of a person's skin, especially the face, right? This is the complexion. This is the same thing that we do today when we talk about one's complexion, right? It never talks or mentions hair, eyebrows, beard, the color of those things, because that's not complexion. It is the hue of a person's appearance, which is typically the face, because that is what we look at when we look at people. We look at their face, right? I'm going to show you something. There was a reason why I asked you the question about the fair complexion, because remember, this book is in their respective characters at large. There are multiple people, a plethora of people in this book that are characterized based on their makeup, their complexion, their characteristic. What do they look like, right? It's not just black people in this book. Here's some examples. Here's the Duke of Ormond, right? We'll go. And this one is awesome because it says that he's of a fair complexion, but it doubles down on this and says a very beautiful face. So if one wanted to misinterpret what complexion meant in this situation, it doubled down by telling you that he had a very beautiful face, which generally, when we're talking about the complexion, we're talking about the hue, and complexion usually denotes the face. This Duke had a fair complexion and a very beautiful face. But we're going to go a little further. Remember Charles, Duke of Richmond, the son of Charles II, and his complexion was black, right? Much like King Charles. What about this Duke of Bedford? The one right next to Duke of Richmond. He had a fair complexion. Look, I understand the situation when it comes to paintings, right? But one of the biggest examples that I can give of paintings being false, and usually you'll find out differences in books, is one of the most important people to ever live, in the flesh, that is, and that's Jesus Christ. Everywhere you go, the ruling class today have denoted him as being white, going all the way back to Michelangelo, back when they was changing a lot of those images. Now, the Bristol Psalters that was found, I think, in Greece, tell you otherwise in terms of the complexion. That was found in like the 11th century. If you read the Bible yourself, you'll get the indication that these people in no way, shape, or form could have been white people. because it tells you right in the book, right? When the prophet Simon was called a Niger, or in the Greek, because the New Testament was written in Greek, they called him a nigger. That's what the word nigger means. Today we take it as disrespect because it's a misinterpretation of the word. But this here, that's not a misinterpretation. We know what complexion is, and we know what hue of that complexion, what this means, just like we know what this means, which is why I asked you the question. And when it comes to paintings, we all know what paintings can do, right? This man, it's not just John Mackey. Princess Sophia's name is on this. She asked for this. And I haven't seen anything make John Mackey's information in this book somehow fraudulent. But throughout history, we could show plenty of times where images, paintings, things depicted was fraudulent. I could have wasted time putting up images of King James that show him as a black man, but what would that do? But be more circle jerk. So I figured, because I know that there's characteristics of all the people in this book, and it's not just black people, just ask you the question. Would you have a problem if it said fair complexion? And your answer was no. And then I'm even glad, because I went to the Webster's and it was something similar, but I was going to bring that and just show the definition of complexion. There is no misinterpretation of this. The interpretation, that works when it's black complexion, but we all know that doesn't work, or it's not necessary when it says fair complexion. It says both in his book. There's a plethora of people, and that was just the courts. I didn't even get to the back where it was the nobilities of Scotland, right? It's plenty in here, It's a good book. But yeah, maybe I should here's another book. In 1882, by Samuel C. Bartlett. If I'm correct, Samuel C. Bartlett was either the 8th or 9th president of the Ivy League school, Dartmouth. And this was a lecture of his that he had on the history of the Pentateuch, basically the 5 books of Moses. And I want to show you something. In this book, it states, in regards to the human race, it has been shown abundantly and historically that each of the external differences often ceases to be characteristic. Thus, the black color is found not only in individuals, as the black Jews of Portugal, but in tribes, as in the Beccarius of the Red Sea, whose hair and character are perfectly Semitic. Didn't we just have in this book a comparison of someone who was considered black, such as a Spaniard or a Jew, and 200 years later, about 150 years later, in 1882, we have the 8th president of an Ivy League school in the United States, in the middle of a lecture, state this. Am I supposed to misinterpret that? Hold on one second. This book, The Classification and Geographical Distribution of the Mammalia by Richard Owen. This book is actually not like anything in terms of history like this. This is actually like an evolution, a book that supports the theory of evolution. Richard Owen is the person who coined the term dinosaur. This book was written in 1840. Let me show you something. It states, There are some Jews still lingering in the valleys of Jordan, having been oppressed by successive of Syria for ages, a low race of people and described by trustworthy travelers as being black as any of the Ethiopian races. This book is 50 years older than this book. That book was written in 1882. This one was written in 1840. This book that was put together in 1733 compared the complexion of a particular black person to a Jew that Samuel C. Bartlett, a president of an Ivy League school, confirmed had this color, which is supported by this man talking about similar Jews in another country in Jordan. Am I supposed to misinterpret that? I'm just saying. I could pull out more books. This is documentation from royalty that asked to have this furnished. That should be the end of the discussion. None of those artists supersedes a princess. That should have been all that you needed. But of course it doesn't, because it didn't say fair complexion. If it said fair complexion, we wouldn't have questioned Princess Sophia. So I have to go to Princess Sophia. I have to get the information from John Mackey. I have to cross-reference that with what information came from an Ivy League president in a book 200 years later in the 1800s, back again 40 years prior to that, to show that all of these things in terms of the color is consistent. There's no misinterpretation of that. People just don't want to believe what the book says. And they want to believe paintings just like they believe the same paintings of Jesus Christ, but they don't even read the Bible to get the information in that book. They'll take the paintings over the book that the paintings are trying to interpret. You believe the paintings over the book, and the paintings are supposed to be describing the people in the book. That's the world that we live in today. It wouldn't be fair for me to just make a statement about images being wrongfully depicted about biblical figures when this book, which is actually in the 1611 Bible, which is no longer in the Bible, yet it was authorized by King James, the person who fathered many of the kings in this book, such as King Charles I, and was the grandfather of King Charles II. You read this book, and let's go to the book of Maccabees during Alexander the Great and the Macedonians. Let's see what the Apocrypha says about whitewashing images. Therefore the Israelites assembled themselves together and came to Mashpah over against Jerusalem, for in Mashpah was the place where they prayed aforetime in Israel. Then they fasted that day, and put on sackcloth, and cast ash upon their heads, and rent their clothes, and laid open the book, of the law, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images. This has been going on for a long time, man. This book says that. Folks can keep their paintings, man. They can keep their paintings. When I read these books say different. They say different. I'm not trying to tell you that you can't believe what you want to believe, but just know that it's your belief and your interpretation, but it doesn't coincide with eyewitness account. Directly by direction of royalty. And this book, the Apocrypha, proves that there have been paintings that are shown to be false because they tried to put their likeness in it. All of the things that you see of Jesus Christ today is the same thing. So paintings mean nothing to me. What the books say, I take what the book says.